In 1965, a black grandmother fed a family of 7 on less than $30 a week, and nobody in that house went without. Today, with 10 times that money, we can't make it to the end of the month. She had mastered 25 survival skills that nobody teaches anymore, and modern science is now confirming what she knew all along. Number 1 on this list couldn't even be touched with your hands. It was the one holding up the other 24. I went through more than 200 first-hand accounts, church cookbooks, and neighborhood records to bring them back. Number 18 was born the day a bank collapsed, and it wasn't 1929. And number 12 turned flower companies into fashion designers without them ever meaning to. You think these skills disappeared because times got better, but times didn't get that much better. What disappeared was something else, and nobody saw it go. Number 25, the cut the butcher almost gave away. Saturday morning, 1962. Grandma walks into the butcher shop, and she doesn't point at the steak. She points at what nobody wants: neck bones, ham hocks, oxtails. But she knows something the butcher doesn't: a bone, over low heat, and 3 hours of patience, gives up everything it's holding inside. That night, a pot of butter beans with a ham hock, less than $2, feeds 5 people with leftovers. But in the 50s, meat started showing up wrapped in plastic on supermarket trays, and the bone became trash. Today, fancy restaurants call it nose to tail and charge luxury prices for it. She called it Tuesday. Bring it back. Ask the butcher for what nobody's asking for. But what came out of that pot was never, ever poured away, because down at the bottom, there was something they sell in jars now. Number 24, the medicine at the bottom of the pot. When the collard greens finished cooking, what was left was a broth, dark, thick, and shining. Pot liquor. No grandmother ever poured it down the drain. They say the sickly children got it by the spoonful, like a tonic. The best of the greens and the best of the bone was sitting right there, and she knew it without anyone having to explain it to her. But the modern world decided it was dirty water, until somebody put it in a jar, called it bone broth, and nutritionists started talking about collagen, calcium, and protein. Bring it back. Don't pour out the pot. Ever. But there was another treasure in that kitchen. It lived behind the stove, in a can. Remember it well, because it has a sister buried further down this list. Number 23. The liquid gold behind the stove. You saw it too, even if you didn't know what it was. The coffee can on the back of the stove, where the bacon grease from breakfast dripped down, drop by drop. That wasn't carelessness. That was a system. That grease seasoned the cornbread skillet, flavored the green beans, fried the Sunday eggs. Nobody bought cooking oil, and the can was never empty. But in the 60s, the plastic bottle of vegetable oil arrived from the supermarket, and the can slipped away without anybody saying goodbye. The new kitchen simply never made room for it. Bringing it back costs 1 can and 1 habit. And Grandma had an even harder magic than that. In her kitchen, yesterday's food didn't get old. It got transformed. Number 22. The second life of every leftover. Yesterday's cornbread wasn't a leftover. It was today's dessert, crumbled into a tall glass with buttermilk and a spoonful of sugar. And in January, she'd open the tomatoes she had canned in August, stew them with a little butter, and drop in yesterday's bread, until the whole kitchen smelled like summer in the middle of winter. But in 1954, Swanson put the first frozen dinner tray on the market, food designed to have no yesterday and no tomorrow. And so we forgot that a kitchen could be a circle where nothing dies. Bring it back. Before you throw anything out, ask yourself what she would have done with it. And that circle didn't start in the kitchen. It started behind the house. And that's where this story gets serious. Number 21. The backyard that was a grocery store. Behind that house, there was no lawn. There was food, collard greens along the fence, tomato plants tied up with old stockings, okra, climbing strings. What got picked at 7 was on the table by 6. In 1943, home gardens grew close to 40% of this country's vegetables. But in the black neighborhood, nobody needed the government to ask. That backyard had been working all along. Then, the supermarket turned that soil into decoration. Today, we pay extra for locally grown, and nothing is more local than your own back door. Bring it back. 1 row, this spring. But what that yard gave in August was too much for 1 table. And she had a plan for that too. Number 20, summer sealed up in jars. August was a marathon. The kitchen boiled for days. Tomatoes, peaches, watermelon rind and vinegar, all of it going into mason jars, an invention from 1858 that never went out of style in those houses. The pop of the seal was music. They say some women filled 100 jars in a single week. That wasn't decoration on those shelves. That was January, solved in August. But the freezer promised the same thing without the work, and the jars sat empty in garages. What nobody mentioned is that no grocery store aisle smells like your own summer. Bring it back. 1 jar, 1 afternoon, 1 family recipe. But not everything they ate came out of a backyard. There was food hanging right over the sidewalks, and it belonged to everybody. Number 19. The trees that belonged to everyone. In that neighborhood, fruit wasn't bought. It was pointed at. Miss Johnson's peach tree, the fig tree out back, the pecan tree on the corner lot. When the season came, they would send the children out with a paper bag. Bring back some peaches and say hello. They came back with a full bag and a story. Nobody called that a sharing economy. It was called being neighbors. But the lots got sold. The trees came down for parking lots, and the fruit moved into a store cooler, wrapped in plastic. Bring it back. Plant a fruit tree. Even though it takes 3 years to pay off, those neighborhoods knew that, and they planted anyway. And remember those children with the paper bag. They're coming back at the end of this list. But first, the promise from the beginning. The skill that was born the day a bank collapsed. Number 18. The buried can. Remember the coffee can behind the stove? It had a secret sister, somewhere in that backyard, under the 3rd tomato plant, next to the fig tree. Another can lay buried, with folded bills wrapped in wax paper inside. Why the dirt and not the bank? Memory. In 1874, the Freedmen's Bank collapsed, the bank created for the newly freed, and they say tens of thousands of black families lost every last cent they had saved. That wound taught a rule that lasted 100 years. Always have something nobody can take from you. Only Grandma knew the exact spot. Sometimes, not even Grandpa. Rusty cans still turn up today when old houses get remodeled. Bring it back. A fund you can't see and can't spend. And speaking of what that backyard held, when a child got sick at 2 in the morning, the pharmacy was in the kitchen, and today's science is still trying to catch up to it. Number 17. The syrup made on the windowsill. You took that spoonful, or you know somebody who did. When the cough showed up in January, Grandma didn't reach for a prescription. She reached for an onion, slices covered in sugar or honey, sitting until they gave up a golden syrup. 1 spoonful every few hours. That jar on the kitchen windowsill was the medicine of the house. but the corner drugstore wrote it off as old wives' nonsense. Today, the studies talk about honey for coughs, and she never needed a study. Bring it back. Onion, honey, 12 hours. But for a heavy chest, she had something stronger, and the whole house smelled like it. Number 16, the rub that opened your chest. Tallow, goose grease, or camphorated oil. Every house had its own version, warmed between her hands and rubbed into a child's chest, with a flannel cloth laid on top. The heat sank in. The chest opened up. The child slept. They say half of Black America grew up with that smell stitched into their memory. But the blue jar from the supermarket made everybody forget the recipe came from home. The idea was the same: warmth, vapor, and hands that touch you when you're sick. That last part doesn't come in any jar. And for skin and hair, the answer was in the pantry. Number 15, the spoonful of castor oil. Castor oil. The bottle children stared at in terror, and grandmothers trusted with total faith. A spoonful to clean you out when the seasons changed. A few warm drops for the hair. A rub for dry skin. But the 20th century filed it away as a relic, until today's shelves filled up with premium castor oil for hair and skin at boutique prices. The same thing she bought for pennies. She was right, twice. Bring it back. The same humble bottle it always was. And when the fever wouldn't break, there was one remedy left that you didn't swallow. Number 14, the onion in the sock and the faith on the forehead. High fever, 2 in the morning. Onion slices on the soles of the feet, held on with a sock. A cool rag on the forehead, and a prayer said low, with her hand resting right on you. Was it the onion working? Or was it the watchfulness of a woman who didn't leave that bedside all night long? They say it was both. Today, we ask a screen about the fever. What hasn't changed is this: healing was always company too, and those hands, when they weren't healing, were mending, because in that house, nothing broken got thrown away. Number 13, the sewing basket by the armchair. Sunday night, radio on. Grandma with the basket in her lap, a wooden egg inside the sock, needle and thread crossing back and forth over the hole in the heel. Every sock got mended 4, 5 times before it retired as a cleaning rag. But cheap nylon and the 12-pack killed the needle. Darning became something poor folks did. Today they call it visible mending and teach it in paid workshops. She did it listening to the radio. Bring it back. 1 needle, 1 Sunday. And with fabric, she did something even bigger. Big enough to change an entire industry. Number 12, the flour sacks that became Sunday dresses. The flour mills figured it out in the 20s. Women weren't throwing away the cotton sacks the flour came in, and they were sewing with them. So the mills did something nobody expected. They hired designers and started printing the sacks with flowers, checks, and colors. They say that by 1942, some 3 million women and children in this country were wearing clothes made from sacks. Little girls in the neighborhood showed up to church in a brand new Sunday dress cut from a 25-pound flour sack, and nobody could tell the difference, because there wasn't one. But clothes got so cheap that sewing stopped making sense. Bring it back. Learn 1 basic stitch, a hem, and a button. And the sheets in that house had their own resurrection trick. Number 11, the sheets cut down the middle. A sheet wears out in the center, never at the edges. She knew it. She'd cut it in 2 lengthwise, flip the halves, and sew the good edges together down the middle. They called it sides to middle. The sheet lived twice as long. Bringing it back fits in 1 sentence. Repair before you replace. And that rule applied to shoes too, with polish, cardboard, and pride. Number 10. The shoes that passed from brother to brother. You remember that smell of shoe polish on a Saturday night? Or your elders remember it for you. A good pair of shoes was a serious investment. When the sole came loose, it went to the shoe repairman, or a cardboard insole held it together in the meantime. Polish every Saturday night, for church on Sunday morning. And when the foot grew, the shoe moved down to the next brother, shining like new. But they say that in the 40s, there were some 60,000 shoe repair shops in this country. And today, there are not even 5,000. Dignity was never about wearing something new. It was about taking care of what you had. Bring it back. Polish, Saturday night. And with that same mind, she handled something far more delicate than shoe polish: the money from one single paycheck. That's where this woman became impossible to beat. Number 9. The envelopes on the kitchen table. Friday, payday. The pay envelope got opened on the kitchen table, and the money got divided into other envelopes, each one with its word written in pencil: rent, light, food, church, funeral. When an envelope went empty, that spending was done until next Friday. No cheating. But the credit card promised you'd never have to choose again, and families stopped seeing their own money. Today, Dave Ramsey sells that exact method to millions, including an app. She kept it in a drawer. Bring it back. 5 envelopes, 1 pencil, this Friday. And there was 1 envelope nobody ever touched. Number 8. The funeral money. In every house there was one sacred pile of money: the burial money. The insurance man came around every week collecting pennies, and those pennies did not get touched, not even in the worst crisis. Because there was one promise that stood above all the others: our people get sent home with dignity. Nobody in this family leaves this world looking poor. Giants were born from that promise. In 1898, in Durham, North Carolina, Mutual was founded. It was built penny by penny, house by house, until it became the largest black-owned insurance company in the country. But that discipline of planning for the end got lost. And today, a funeral catches families off guard and buries them in debt. She was never caught off guard by anything, not even temptation. Number 7. The word that worked like a bank. At the corner store, Grandma bought on credit. The storekeeper wrote it down in a little notebook, and on Friday, she paid it down to the last penny. Her credit wasn't a number, it was her name, and a clean name opened more doors than any bank. But in 1930, the first modern supermarket opened in Queens, King Cullen, and with every supermarket that came to a neighborhood, a credit notebook died. Credit became a cold number in a faraway office. And so we forgot that the first currency was always your word. Hers was worth gold. And even so, she never depended on a single source. Number 6. The money that didn't come from the paycheck. Ironing for other households, selling sweet potato pies after church, hemming pants, minding children, selling eggs from the hen house. Grandma always had 2 or 3 small rivers flowing besides the big paycheck. Nobody called it extra income. It was called not depending on anybody. But the modern job promised complete security, and we put all our eggs in one basket. Today, they call it a side hustle and sell it as a brand new invention. She was the inventor. She just never got the patent. Bring it back. 1 talent of yours, 1 small income. And behind all that money, the envelopes, the notebook, the pies, stood a network no bank has ever managed to copy. The whole neighborhood. Number 5. The plate that crossed the street. You carried it once, or you received it. the plate covered with a dish towel, crossing the street in a child's hands, headed for the house where things were short. Nobody called it charity. The word would have been an insult. It was called, "I sent a plate over to Miss May," and that plate always came back full of something else. Eggs, plums, a piece of pie. But the fences got taller, and the neighbors became strangers. Bring it back. One plate. This week. To somebody who needs it. That traveling plate was a food bank with no office. And there was one building where that whole network became an institution. Number 4, the church that was more than a church. Sunday was the sermon, yes, but the church was also the job board, the news service, the emergency fund, and the school. When a family fell, a layoff, a fire, a widow, the pastor announced it, and the envelope moved down the pews. They say nobody in that neighborhood hit rock bottom 2 Sundays in a row, but attendance dropped, and the whole net went with it. Bringing it back doesn't require a building. It requires showing up. And that net had one last thread, the finest one of all, the eyes in the windows. Number 3, every child belonged to every mother. Remember the children with the peach bag? They could cross half the neighborhood alone because they were never alone. If you did something wrong 3 streets from home, your mother knew before you got there. Every window had eyes, and every grandmother had permission to correct you, to feed you, to send you home. But today, we raise children behind closed doors. Those women knew that a child watched over by 20 mothers grows up straight. What they saved for last, though, wasn't watching. It was the 2 skills holding up the other 23, and neither one can be bought. Number 2, reading people. Grandma didn't need you to tell her anything. She watched you come up the porch steps, and she already knew. Whether you were hungry, whether you were in trouble, whether that new friend of yours was no good. "I don't like that boy." And months later, she was right. It wasn't magic. It was a whole lifetime of watching people. At church, at the store, on the porch. But today, we look at screens instead of faces. And that radar is going dark. Bring it back. Look people in the eye. And listen more than you talk. And even so, that wasn't her greatest skill. Number 1, and you couldn't touch it with your hands. Teaching by doing. Grandma never gave a lesson in her life. She put you beside her. Hold this. Watch how I do it. Now you. The recipe, the mending, the envelopes, the remedy. All of it passed from her hands into yours without a single book. The other 24 skills survived for generations. Because of this one. Number 1 was the passing down. And it's exactly the one we let die when the kitchen ran out of children standing there, watching. Because here is the whole truth. Everything she did for free is sold in courses today. The broth, the envelopes, the sewing, the garden. She was not a poor woman getting by. She was the most complete survival system this country has ever had. And she only asked one thing in return. Somebody beside her, watching. Somebody taught you something on this list. A recipe, a remedy, an envelope with a word written in pencil. Write in the comments which one you remember and who taught it to you. Every memory written down there is a skill that doesn't die. But here's something worth sitting with. Everything you just watched, Grandma had already mastered as a little girl. By age 12, she could do 20 things most grown adults today couldn't even begin. 20. That list is in the video on your screen right now. Tap it.